It all began with a plain white envelope sitting in my mailbox, marked with that annoyingly familiar Oakwood Estates HOA logo. Nothing fancy, just an official-looking letter folded neatly inside. I pulled it out, half expecting another newsletter about neighborhood garage sale dates or some recycled landscaping tips. But the first line stopped me cold. In bold black font, "Your property lighting violates community brightness standards." I let out a short laugh. Really? That was a new one. I figured maybe it was a mistake, so I kept reading. But as I went further down the page, the laugh disappeared. The notice was real, the tone was stern, and they were serious. Now I've lived in Oakwood Estates for 6 years. It's the kind of place with identical beige houses, immaculately trimmed hedges, and people who greet you with smiles that never quite reach their eyes. Everyone waves, but no one really talks. And then there's the HOA, the neighborhood overlords. They're the type that take deep pride in power washing driveways and measuring grass height like it's an Olympic sport. I'm Greg, by the way, an emergency room doctor. I work long, chaotic night shifts at the hospital, patching people up and making decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. So, when I finally get home at 3 or 4 in the morning, all I want is to walk up to my house safely without tripping over a stray rock or being startled by a wandering raccoon. That's why I'd recently upgraded my outdoor lighting. Nothing crazy, just a few energy-efficient LED floodlights over the driveway, some motion-activated lights along the side yard, and pathway lighting so I don't twist my ankle hauling. Groceries at dawn. Apparently that was disrupting neighborhood harmony. The HOA claimed I was disturbing the character of the community with my illumination. I kid you not. They actually used the word illumination, like I was running a lighthouse in the middle of suburbia. According to them, my lights were excessive, too intense, too visible. So what did I do? I showed up to the next HOA meeting. I had the letter in hand and a chip on my shoulder. The meetings are held in the clubhouse every month, with folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and people who pretend they're part of local government. I walked in late, still wearing my scrubs, and sat in the back. The room was full of retirees and neighborhood busybodies. Mark, the HOA president, about 50, always in a tucked-in polo and cargo shorts, stood at the front like he was addressing the UN. "We'll now discuss a recent lighting violation," he said, glancing down at his clipboard, then looking up at me. "Greg, your house was flagged by multiple residents for excessive outdoor brightness." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a crime now?" A few chuckles. Mark wasn't amused. "We have guidelines. You've exceeded the maximum lumen count." "Lumen count?" I asked. "Is someone walking around with a light meter?" "No," he said stiffly, "but it's visually obvious. Your lights are disruptive. They spill into other yards. People have complained." "Funny," I said, "because the only thing spilling into my yard is Carol's damn sprinkler system every night at 11. Mark's jaw tightened. Carol looked away. I tried to be reasonable. I explained about my job, the hours, the need for safety. I even offered to adjust the angle of the lights or switch to softer bulbs. But Mark wasn't having it. "You have 2 weeks to bring your lighting into compliance," he said, "or the HOA will begin issuing daily fines." "How much?" I asked. $50 a day. I did the math in my head. That's $2,500 a month. For lights. Not unapproved construction, not noise violations. Lights. I left the meeting steaming. I stood on my porch that night, looking at my setup. Neat, tidy, functional, not blinding, not offensive. And then I looked across the street, at the tall, silver light pole casting a flood of pale orange light over half the block. The street lights, the same ones that buzzed quietly and attracted swarms of moths. The same ones that lit up everyone's windows whether they wanted it or not. And that's when the idea hit me. If the HOA was so concerned about brightness, maybe it was time for them to get a taste of darkness. At first, it was just a joke in my head, a petty little fantasy. But then I got curious. I started researching. I looked up the lighting infrastructure in Oakwood Estates, found out that the community's streetlights weren't actually owned by the HOA. They were leased from the city's utility provider. The HOA paid monthly to keep them running. But when I dug a little deeper, I found something even more interesting. The lease had expired. According to public records, the HOA had failed to renew the lease for the past year. The utility company had kept the lights running out of courtesy, sending reminders the HOA apparently ignored or misplaced. But the infrastructure was fair game. They were preparing to decommission or sell it. That's when I knew. I wasn't just going to fight the fine. I was going to flip the script. I called the utility company, asked a few careful questions. Was the infrastructure still available? Were they willing to sell the poles and light boxes to a private buyer? I expected to be laughed off the phone, but the rep, Janice, I think her name was, said, "We're open to individual purchase if you assume maintenance and liability." "Can I get that in writing?" I asked. "Sure," she said. "It's rare, but it's legal." I told her I'd like to schedule a purchase. All 18 poles in the Oakwood Estates area. She paused, probably wondering what I was up to, but didn't ask. It cost me a chunk of money, yes, but it wasn't outrageous, less than what I'd paid for my SUV. For the price of a used car, I now owned every single streetlight in my neighborhood. And more importantly, the control switches that turned them on and off. I waited for the perfect moment. Friday night, right before the HOA's beloved Movie on the Lawn event. They'd set up a projector and folding chairs near the clubhouse. Families would gather, kids with glow sticks, parents sipping wine from plastic cups. And just as they hit play on the opening credits, I flipped the master switch. Oakwood Estates went pitch black. It started like any other boring Tuesday. I had just gotten home from an exhausting 14-hour ER shift. Blood on my shoes, adrenaline still buzzing through my veins, and the only thing I could think about was collapsing into bed. But on my way up the porch steps, I saw a plain white envelope sticking out of my mailbox. That wouldn't have been noteworthy, except for the bold Oakwood Estates HOA logo printed on the corner like some kind of municipal threat. I sighed. These people again. I didn't open it right away. I tossed it on the kitchen counter next to a half-empty coffee mug and some unopened junk mail. Took a shower. Let the water scald my skin. When I finally got around to it, I wasn't expecting anything serious. Maybe a reminder about the block party. Maybe some nonsense about the approved. Shades of mulch. But when I unfolded the letter and read the first line, my mouth actually dropped open. Your property lighting violates community brightness standards. That was the first sentence. No hello, no explanation. Just a dry, authoritative declaration in bold typeface. I kept reading, hoping it would get better. It didn't. The letter went on to accuse me of excessive outdoor illumination, claiming that my house disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood and had drawn multiple complaints. They even cited a specific section of the community, bylaws I had apparently violated, Section 5.3.2, dealing with light pollution and lumen intensity. There was something almost insulting about the bureaucratic precision of it. They didn't just say, "Your lights are too bright." They pulled out the rule book. I sat down at the kitchen table and let the letter fall to the wood like it burned. At first I laughed, but then the reality sank in. This wasn't a joke. They were threatening to fine me, $50 per day, until I took the lights down or dimmed them to whatever arbitrary standard they decided was acceptable. Now here's the thing. I'm not some guy who strings Christmas lights up in July. I'm not running a nightclub in my backyard. I had installed a set of security floodlights around my property a few weeks earlier. LED, motion activated, energy efficient. One set lit up the driveway. Another was placed along the side of the house where a shady figure had once tried to break in. There was also a set of soft ground lights lining the front path. More for me than anything else. I work nights. I get home when most people are asleep. And walking up to a dark house isn't just inconvenient. It feels unsafe. Apparently, to the HOA, keeping your property secure was an act of war. The next day, I showed up at the monthly HOA meeting. They hold them in the clubhouse, which sits in the center of the neighborhood like some kind of beige throne room. There were about 24 people sitting on folding chairs, sipping bad coffee, flipping through photocopied agendas. I stood near the back, arms crossed, the letter in my pocket, still crumpled from the night before. Mark, the HOA president, spotted me immediately. The guy always looked like he was auditioning to be in a khaki commercial. Neatly tucked polo, shirt, clipboard in hand, smug grin like he'd just solved world peace. He gave me a curt nod and started the meeting. They spent the first 10 minutes discussing flower beds, someone's unauthorized mailbox paint job, and a duck that had taken up residence in the community pond. Then came my turn. "We've received multiple complaints," Mark said, looking right at me without saying my name, "about a home on Birch Hollow Lane, specifically regarding excessive nighttime lighting." He said it like I'd committed a felony. "It's been brought to our attention that these lights create a glare and interfere with the tranquil appearance of the neighborhood." I raised my hand. "Would this be my house we're talking about?" Mark sighed like I was wasting his precious HOA time. "Greg, you know the rules. We have standards. You've exceeded acceptable brightness levels." "According to who?" I asked. "Is there a city ordinance I'm violating? Or did Carol just complain because she can't fall asleep without her blackout curtains?" Carol, sitting 2 rows ahead, stiffened in her seat and muttered something under her breath. "The bylaws are clear," Mark replied, flipping through his papers like he was a real judge. "Section 5.32. You agreed to them when you moved in." "Right," I said. "And I also agreed to feel safe in my own home. I work night shifts, Mark. I get home at 3 a.m. You want me to walk up to a pitch-black house? You can use a flashlight," someone mumbled. I turned to look. Dave. That guy had once submitted a formal complaint because my recycling bin was visible from the sidewalk. I took a deep breath. "This is ridiculous," I said. "My lights are no brighter than the streetlights outside," which, by the way, shine directly into my bedroom window all night. "Should I file a complaint too?" Mark folded his hands like a disappointed school principal. "Greg, this isn't personal. It's about maintaining community standards. If we let one person bend the rules, it sets a precedent." "I'm not bending anything. I'm trying to protect my property. The cops don't patrol this neighborhood. Do you want to volunteer for night watch duty?" Silence. "The fine will begin tomorrow," Mark concluded. $50 per day until you comply," I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I was so far beyond pissed that laughter was the only response left. When the meeting adjourned, I stood out on the clubhouse steps and stared down the road at the row of tall, humming streetlights that lined Birch Hollow Lane. Those lights had been there forever. The HOA always bragged about them, how they made the neighborhood feel safe and welcoming. They stayed on from sunset to sunrise, buzzing faintly, casting their yellow-orange glow across sidewalks and driveways. They were way brighter than anything I had installed, yet no one ever complained about those. And that's when the idea started forming. I don't know what flipped in my head right then, but it was like someone had finally poked me one too many times. The HOA wanted a fight over lights? Fine. I was done playing by their rules. They didn't want my house lit up. Okay. Let's see how they liked it when the entire neighborhood went dark. The morning after the lights went out, the neighborhood was buzzing. And not in the good coffee shop chat way. People were standing on their lawns with crossed arms, squinting at the now useless poles. A few wandered around with flashlights in broad daylight, as if somehow trying to reverse engineer the darkness that had swallowed Oakwood Estates the night before. And the best part? No one knew what had happened. Not yet. The group chat for Birch Hollow Lane had exploded at midnight. I scrolled through the messages while sipping my coffee, watching in quiet amusement. Anyone else's streetlights go out? Just call the utility company. They said they don't manage ours directly? HOA better fix this ASAP. My ring cam didn't pick up a thing after 10 p.m. Someone saw a coyote on Willow Street, in the dark. I chuckled and turned my phone off. The switch had worked perfectly. Every single pole was mine now, legally, quietly, and without a single neighbor knowing it until the moment I flipped the lights off. All 18 poles, each equipped with a control box, and each one disabled by me with the help of a licensed electrician I had on call from the hospital. That night's HOA event had been a total disaster. They'd set up the inflatable movie screen on the clubhouse lawn, unrolled the big yellow extension cords, laid out picnic blankets, and just as the Pixar logo lit up the screen, boom. Blackout. Not a flicker. No projector. No lights. Not even a glimmer from the street. People screamed like a power plant had exploded. Kids cried. Someone tripped over a lawn chair. I waited a full 30 seconds, then casually walked over with a flashlight and a manila envelope tucked under my arm. Mark was fuming. "What the hell is going on, Greg?" "Oh, I thought you'd know," I said, playing dumb. "Aren't you in charge of the community lighting?" "Don't play games," he snapped, still trying to untangle the power cord. "Did you do something?" I handed him the envelope. He looked down at the contents. Official documents, receipts, notarized purchase agreements. One page had the property transfer for the poles, signed and stamped by the utility company. "You bought them?" he said, voice caught somewhere between disbelief and rage. "Technically, I own the poles and the boxes now. The HOA's lease expired. They didn't renew. So I made them an offer. They accepted." Mark was silent. The projector, still powerless, flopped in the wind behind him like a wounded balloon. I figured since my house lighting was such an issue, I added with a shrug, maybe we all needed a little less brightness. You could feel the ripple of people processing what I'd said. A few chuckles here and there. Someone whispered, "That's actually genius." Another voice from the dark, "Wait, is that even legal?" "Yes," I said, raising my flashlight. "It's all in there. Public record. Feel free to confirm." The next few days were chaos for the HOA. Mark tried to spin the situation, calling it a temporary infrastructure outage. But people weren't buying it. Every homeowner who called the utility company got the same answer. The lights had been sold. The new owner had chosen to deactivate them permanently. Oakwood Estates had never seen this kind of drama. The neighborhood gossip shifted from who had the best lawn to who was secretly siding with me. It started with eye contact. People would glance at me from across the street, and instead of their usual icy nods, I started getting small waves, thumbs up, even a few claps on the back from people who never used to talk to me. One woman, Claire, who lived 3 houses down and ran a blog about local parenting hacks, stopped me during a morning walk. "I don't even care that it's dark," she said, grinning. I love that someone finally stood up to Mark. This place was starting to feel like a prison. That's when I realized something bigger was happening. This wasn't just about streetlights anymore. It was about control. People had been quietly seething about HOA micromanagement for years, about paint swatches and trash can placement and fines for leaving your garage door open for 10 minutes too long. My stunt with the lights was just the match. The fire was already there. The breaking point came when the HOA sent out a desperate letter trying to reclaim the poles. It was worded like a legal threat, but it fell flat. I had the documents. They had nothing. That same week, a group of homeowners formed a petition to call for a leadership vote. Turns out, if 30% of residents demand it, the HOA board has to hold an election. We hit that number in 3 days. Mark saw it coming. His speeches at the next meeting were filled with buzzwords: stability, tradition, protecting property values. But the room had turned against him. People didn't want to hear about the rules anymore. They wanted to hear about freedom, about sanity, about not getting fined because their kid's bike was left in the yard for 10 minutes. One night, Carol, yes, that Carol, the one who used to glare at my driveway lights like they offended her ancestors, knocked on my door with a bottle of wine. "I think I owe you an apology," she said. I blinked. "Is this a prank?" she laughed. "No, I was scared, I guess. I thought the HOA made us safe, but I've lived here for 12 years and I've never seen people actually smile at each other like they are now." We talked for over an hour. About the neighborhood, about change, about how maybe people were ready for something different. So, I ran for HOA president. I didn't plan to. Honestly, I wanted to make my point and be left alone. But people started encouraging me, saying I was the only one who had ever stood up and done something real. Someone printed campaign flyers without even asking me. Someone else built a little website called Let Greg Lead. And then, just like that, it happened. Election day came. We had folding chairs again, bad coffee again, but this time the air felt different. I gave a short speech, nothing dramatic, just told people the truth, that I wasn't perfect, but I'd always stand up for what made sense. That I wanted fewer rules, more transparency, and a community that acted like one. I won. By a landslide. Mark didn't say goodbye, just packed. Up and left quietly one weekend. Within a month, things started to change. We reviewed every outdated policy, slashed the worst ones, and put more decisions to a vote. The HOA became less of a dictatorship and more of a forum. People felt involved again. And the lights? I made a deal with the city to install new ones, solar-powered, motion-triggered, low-profile. They kept the streets safe without burning into bedroom windows. We let each homeowner opt in for their own area. Some kept it dark, others lit it up. No fines, no threats. But I kept the master switch. It sits in a little locked box in my garage, just a reminder of the night everything changed, of how a single flick of a switch took power from the few and gave it back to everyone. Winter rolled into Oakwood Estates with its usual frosty stubbornness. But the atmosphere in the neighborhood felt strangely lighter, even with the early sunsets and long, chilly nights. People were smiling more. Dogs barked a little less. The occasional "good morning" wasn't met with tight-lipped nods anymore, but actual words, even conversations. For a place once ruled by silence, rules, and passive-aggressive letters taped to doors, it was a strange and welcome shift. After the election, things hadn't changed overnight, but they had started. And not in the sweeping, Hollywood montage kind of way. It was in the smaller moments, like the fact that mailbox color complaints dropped to 0, or how someone finally suggested planting native wildflowers in the front entrance bed instead of the sterile, HOA-approved impatiens. Even Mark's precious meeting minutes had gotten shorter. Instead of reading out loud each clause like we were being graded, I just emailed everyone a Google Doc. My first act as HOA president was pretty symbolic, honestly. I rescinded the automatic fine system. No more tickets for having your trash bins visible on pickup day. No more measuring grass with rulers or debating whether your Christmas lights were too early or lingering. I told people, if they had an issue with a neighbor, they should try talking first before filing a complaint. This didn't go over well with a few longtime rule warriors, of course. Dave, for instance, kept emailing me screenshots of bylaws, like he thought he'd catch me in a trap. But something funny happened. Most people were relieved. Like they'd been holding their breath for years without even realizing it. I started hosting monthly porch talk meetups instead of the old sterile clubhouse meetings. We'd pick a different driveway each time, drag out folding chairs, and let people bring snacks or wine or whatever they had lying around. The first one felt awkward. Everyone hovered at the edges, unsure of how to act without laminated agendas or formal seating. But after about 20 minutes, it was like we'd all been waiting for someone to give us permission to just be neighbors. Even Carol showed up. She brought lemon bars. During one of those porch talks, someone asked about the streetlights. They weren't angry, just curious. Are we keeping them off forever? A woman named Ellie asked. She was new to the neighborhood, had 2 toddlers, and genuinely wanted to feel safe walking her stroller in the early morning fog. I've been working on something, I told her, then turned to the group. Actually, if you're all okay with it, I'd like to show you. A few days later, I brought them out. Solar-powered, motion-activated pathway lights. I'd partnered with a local solar company that offered a community discount. We could install them selectively, driveways, sidewalks, intersections, but only if the homeowner opted in, and they could adjust brightness themselves using an app. It was flexible, efficient, and most importantly, not the HOA's business unless someone wanted it to be. Ellie was the first to sign up. Within a week, half the street followed. People liked having the choice. Some wanted the old bright lighting back, others preferred the quiet dark. But now they could decide for themselves, and that was the point. A couple of the old guard tried to push back. They said things felt too relaxed and worried that we'd lose our identity as a premium community. One guy even said, "What happens when someone paints their house neon green?" I told him we'd cross that fluorescent bridge when we came to it, but also reminded him that fear of hypothetical disasters wasn't a good reason to punish people over mulch shades and mailbox hinges. Funny enough, no one painted anything neon green. One weekend in December, I hosted a holiday lights contest. This time, it wasn't about conformity. It was about creativity. No approved color palettes or wattage limits. People went wild. Someone built a life-sized sleigh made of pool noodles. A kid on Maple Court synced their lights to a dubstep version of Jingle Bells. I gave out handmade trophies, best. Use of inflatables, brightest yard, without blinding planes, most likely to start a Santa cult. It wasn't perfect. The lights still went out early in some areas. The HOA budget needed work after years of wasteful spending. And sure, the bylaws still existed because you can't run a community on vibes alone. But now those bylaws were tools, not weapons. I think the most telling moment came from Mark himself. He approached me one cold evening as I was hanging lights on my own porch. He looked different, less stiff. His shirt was untucked. He wasn't holding a clipboard for the first time in memory. "I was wrong about you," he said, hands in his coat pockets. "I almost dropped the zip ties." "Come again?" He smiled, small but real. "I thought you were just being difficult, stirring the pot, but I see what you were doing now." I waited for the punchline, but it didn't come. "You gave people something I never really thought about," he continued. "Choice and trust. That matters more than rules." I didn't have much to say to that. Just nodded and offered him the last of the zip ties. Later that night, I sat on my porch steps with a mug of hot cider, watching the neighborhood glow. Not from my floodlights, not from the tall steel street poles I once owned, but from porches and trees and windows, each one lit up differently, freely, joyfully. People passed by with dogs, waved, sometimes stopped to chat. A group of teenagers walked past laughing, carrying cocoa and wearing matching hats. Nobody told them to be quiet. Nobody glared. It hit me then, how strange and beautiful it was to find community not in control, but in the letting go of it. We weren't just neighbors now. We were participants in something shared, something human. And yeah, I still have that master switch, locked in a box, labeled in Sharpie. In case of emergency, drama only. But the real power, that was never in the lights. It was in the people. It had been all along.